Hello and welcome to Rotted Reviews, and today I thought I'd keep it a little bit more conversational. So I'm back behind the desk and I'm just going to kind of free flow this. I oftentimes don't have a script for anything anyway, but this is going to be even less so. So I got a request from patron Catherine, who wanted me to review the miniseries put out by ABC in 1997 of Stephen King's The Shining. However, this request came with a little bit of a caveat that's going to be a challenge, and I'm going to see if I'm up to it. And that request is that I not compare it to the Stanley Kubrick movie. This is going to be fun. So I'm going to adhere to that. The only thing I really will say, I just kind of want to get it out of the way, as far as my thoughts on the film, because I haven't actually done a review video of it for some reason. Maybe I'll get to it at some point. But my thoughts on the Stanley Kubrick movie is that it was an iconic piece of horror cinema that was, by and large, more of a Stanley Kubrick movie than a Stephen King adaptation. So, that being said, and that out of the way, I'm not going to refer to the movie anymore. Again, I'm keeping this free flow. So, editing Mike, when you get to this, if I ever start rambling about the movie or even start mentioning the movie, go ahead and just put in an oops cut. So we'll find out how many times I accidentally stumble into this. But the 1997 miniseries. So back in the 90s, ABC worked in collaboration with Stephen King to put out a number of miniseries. So in 1994, they had The Stand, and that blew up, and that caused them to make a number of others, including a bit lesser known, or lesser received, certainly, 1995 one of The Langoliers. And then in 1997, he tackled The Shining, which, from what I understand, he considers to be one of his greatest works. And he had kind of bemoaned the fact that a proper adaptation had not at that point yet been done. So he helmed this one, or at least had a lot of creative influence, a lot of oversight. There were some kind of specific little tidbits in there that they needed to adjust as far as not... I'm not comparing it. I'm only referencing as far as not maligning the Stanley Kubrick movie. So, as much as he didn't like that adaptation, or didn't at least see it as a quality adaptation, he was forced to recant that and not make reference to it at any point. So that allowed him the ability to go ahead and make the miniseries. So, anywho, so yeah, the miniseries got made, and it was released in 3 parts over the course of, I think, 3 different weeks. On April 21st to May 1st, April 27th to May 1st, 1997 was the release. So, okay, sounds like 3 or so separate days, one after the other. So yeah, this was a miniseries that I caught when it aired in 1997. I was a big fan of both The Stand and The Langoliers, and I was looking forward to The Shining. And at that point, I don't think that I had actually seen the movie. Okay. So, but I do remember really liking it back when I first saw it. I was 17 years old when it came out, and I enjoyed it a fair bit. And I've watched it a couple of times since then, including very recently, so that I could have it fresh in my memory to fulfill this request. And I have to say that I still enjoy it, but I don't think that it really kind of holds up as much as my first watch. And I think that kind of comes down to a few things. So I kind of want to discuss the pros and cons of this miniseries while adhering to the format request put forth. So this miniseries follows the familiar story at this point of Danny, Wendy, and Jack Torrance going to the Colorado hotel and being caretakers for the winter season while it's shut down, and making sure that it's in tip-top shape for when it needs to open back up again in the spring. And it winds up being a lot more than they bargained for. The hotel is most certainly haunted, incredibly haunted as it turns out, which doesn't bode well for Jack, who is balancing his family life with his troubles with alcoholism and trying to get back on his feet. Wendy, who's trying to manage her family that's been kind of pulled apart prior to this, and this definitely is not helping. And Danny, who's just a little kid trying to make his way through the world that's super confusing, and all the more confusing by the fact that he has this telekinetic, in tune with other worlds or other. He has The Shining. So in this miniseries, we have Jack, played by Steven Weber, Wendy, played by Rebecca De Mornay, and Danny, played by Courtland Mead. And if I had to give my biggest criticism to this entire miniseries, I would have to say that the casting is a huge part of that. Of those three, I have to say that Rebecca De Mornay probably did the best job of the characters as Wendy, although not comparing it to the film, but just talking about it on its own merits as a book adaptation. So yeah, kind of lightly comparing it to the book at the very least, I have to say that although she did a very good job, she really just didn't feel like Wendy. I have a very personal relationship with this book. I thought it was a fantastic read. I love Stephen King novels in general, and I consider this to be one of his top tier ones. There were a lot of elements that really kind of spoke to me in it. So this is a fairly personal story for me as far as my history, my personal history and relationship with horror and literature. So, as far as the Wendy character, I thought, again, Rebecca did a very good job, but it still just didn't feel like Wendy. And I think that Steven Weber didn't do a bad job as Jack Torrance. I thought he actually did pretty well. I think that there was a little bit of doomed from the start aspects of this in that he wasn't. As far as his performance and the way he was written in this, I think that one of the things that I liked more about it is the fact that he was given the time to kind of slowly turn. There was the built-in love for his family that really did kind of, well, pardon the expression, but shine through. There was the gradual procession of his downward spiral, and it was gradual. And granted, he did have 4.5 hours to kind of eke that out, but at the very least we did see the downward spiral. We didn't just catch up with somebody that was already on his way there. And I think that that's something that's actually kind of missing from a lot of horror movies and horror books and so forth, is that establishing baseline, that show of what things have been, so that we're watching it deteriorate as it's getting pummeled by these external forces. I do think that there was a little bit of the deck stacked against him, in that I think as a book adaptation, it perhaps adhered to things a little bit too rigidly. Stephen King, although I do love his writing, he has a tendency to use very colorful colloquialisms and embed that and imbue that into his characters. And sometimes it works and sometimes it just doesn't. There's just the phrases that they say, and it gives them kind of unique aspects and personalities and lets them pop off the page, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it makes for good, entertaining, or realistic characters on screen. Page does not directly translate to screen necessarily all that well, and that's why adaptations need to be adapted. So when we do have Steven Weber try to sell the lines of "you'll take your medicine, you little pup," it just, I don't know, it rings hollow. It doesn't, it's not intimidating, and I think that that's something that definitely could have stood the adaptation mark and actually have been changed for going from page to screen. And there's a number of little things like that. But I think the real standout as far as the poor choice in casting goes to the character of Danny, played by Courtland Mead. Not only does it not feel at all like Danny, he's just too old, but the performance was, and I really try to not be the kind of person that rags on kids' performances as far as in movies go, although oftentimes they can be the most irritating aspect of horror films. I know that they're not going to be delivering, 10-page monologues that, tear your heart out. But at the same time, I do think that the performance does need to be kind of judged. It's a very central character, and I just don't think it was there at all. Okay, so let's go ahead and discuss the things that I did like about this, because they are honestly plentiful. I do enjoy this miniseries. I am unabashed about it. I know a lot of people don't. I don't, everybody has their own opinion. I liked it. So what did I like about it? Well, a number of things. First of all, the setting. This was actually filmed at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado, where Stephen King got his inspiration for the novel. And I thought it was beautiful. Gorgeous location. Everything about it I thought worked really well. The setting was just fantastic. Secondly, and quite appropriately to be secondly, is the secondary characters. I really enjoyed Melvin Van Peebles as Dick Halloran. I thought his performance in this was really solid all the way through, both at the beginning where he's walking Danny around and doing the introduction to him and also discussing The Shining. I thought that sequence, especially talking about The Shining and going through, give me a blast and, knocking the taillight out of his car, things like that, was really, really great. Solid performance, and it had some great chemistry, honestly, with Courtland Mead on that. And then also later on, as everything started to devolve and go higgledy-piggledy and actually come to the rescue. First of all, I really did enjoy that it adhered to the novel very well with that character, and I'll just leave it at that. But then he also, everything about it worked really well as far as him trying to get back to Colorado, constantly being blasted psychically with The Shining, things like that, as well as Elliot Gould playing Stuart Ullman as the hotel manager at the very beginning. It's a small part, but I thought he performed it very admirably, as I would expect Elliot Gould to do, no less, as well as Pat Hingle playing Pete Wilson, the maintenance man walking Jack around and showing him the boiler also in the beginning. Honestly, this miniseries, I think one of the best things that it has going for it is the setup. All the beginning sequences really worked extraordinarily well, in my opinion, as far as establishing the nature of the hotel, the daunting task that Jack is up to, and all the people kind of walking everybody around the situation before everybody leaves and the Torrances are completely on their own. One other thing that I really liked was some, but not all, and honestly not even most, of the haunting apparitions, the spiritual elements, the monsters, if you will. But the ones that I really did like, I liked a lot, especially the woman in room 217. Yes, 217. I thought it was very creepy, some great makeup effects there, and it worked extraordinarily well. The topiary, the living topiary thing. Okay. It's tough to talk about this miniseries without talking about the topiary. So in this, we have a bunch of hedge animals and so forth. And there were a couple different sequences that happened with them. For the most part, they didn't move, at least on camera. And those aspects of it, I thought worked really well. I do think, in all honesty, that this is probably one of those things that has faded a little bit more than most on the repeat viewings. But even so, this really got me when I first saw this, and less so now. But I still think it works really well, insofar as we don't see them move, but they clearly move. Danny will be out playing in the snow with the snow on top of the hedge animals, the topiaries. And you'll hear rustling and the snow will be completely off of one of them, but not the rest. Or one of them will be a little bit closer, or, closer still, or actually even change its shape and actually open its mouth if it's, big lion or something like that. And it's always happening. You turn your head, you turn back, very Doctor Who Weeping Angels-esque kind of thing there. But even me on my first viewing in 1997 did think that it went too hard on the cheesy factor. And relied on CG during critical moments, especially towards the end, where we actually did see them move. And I just thought that was the wrong way to go, especially for something that had such a good creep factor to it leading up to that. Aside from that, we did have, the ballroom full of dead people and one or two standout characters and so forth, but I don't think that any of them were really that creepy or really resonated in any way, shape, or form. They were just kind of there and dead. They were just part of the hotel at that point. So if I were to kind of give a big ol' opinion overview of this, I would say that this was a solid miniseries that you would kind of need to keep your expectations in check, because this is a made-for-TV Stephen King miniseries, which means you're going to have the limited stuff that can actually be shown on screen in a family-friendly ABC household environment, as well as the limited budget of a television production. But with those expectations in check, I thought that this was a remarkably well done miniseries that had the unfortunate aspect of always looming in the shadow of... I was glad to see something actually brought to screen that took the concept of this novelization and brought it into an adaptation that did it justice in terms of actually fleshing out the characters, tackling their individual issues in a way that felt a bit more reverent, as well as actually tackling some of the plot point beats that the novel did and not having to skip over them, such as the hornet's nest and so forth. With the 4.5-hour runtime, there were some moments in this that did feel like a down tempo that went on way too long, some slow moments that were way too slow, but overall I thought it made up for it. And if you can get past the made-for-TV family aspect of this, as well as the budget restraints and some of the cheesy VFX, I thought it was a solid adaptation. And I get where Catherine's coming from as far as wanting a review that doesn't compare it to the movie, because I think that that's honestly where this miniseries probably falls down the most in the general public eye, is it is being compared with the movie at all times. And I think that that's unfair. I think more what it needs to be compared with is the book. And I think as far as that, it holds up fairly well. Truth be told, I would still absolutely love to actually see a one season on, I don't know, Netflix or Prime or something that doesn't have the family restrictions and actually is willing to dump some money into it. A proper 5 or 6 hour long adaptation that just goes completely as bonkers as the book does, in no holds barred territory, with actually fleshing out the characters, showing Al Shockley more, showing the, Jack's struggle more, having a more realistic take on the abuse as opposed to stomping up and down the halls saying, I'm going to, you'll take your medicine, you pup. Things like that. I would love to see this book actually brought to screen with an adaptation that terrified me and made me fall in love with the source material just as much as reading this did for the first time. And as much as I love the miniseries, the one thing that I can say is it doesn't quite do that. So there we go. I hope that meets the criteria of the request and approaches this miniseries in a fair shake fashion, which is honestly one of the things that has always been a little bit disappointing to me about the public reception of it, is I just don't think it's really gotten a fair shake. So on that, more than anything else, as well as honestly some of the solid quality within it, I do recommend a viewing of it. I'm not going to say you're going to love it, and I'm not going to say it's going to be your favorite Stephen King adaptation, but I think it's enjoyable, and I think it's worth watching. Just follow Catherine's lead and try to break yourself away from the comparison to the Kubrick movie and just take it as the novel adaptation that it is. So that should about do it. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please click like and subscribe. And if you want to support me further, help keep this channel going, help to keep these videos going, maybe consider checking out my Patreon. We have watch parties, Discord benefits, all sorts of stuff starting at only $1 a month. You can't get better than that. Literally, you can't. That's actually the lowest dollar value they'll let you set. So thank you very much. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.